guys, how are you doing? It's Harrison back with another APES stream. So today we're going to go over fishing practices and kind of a quick review of Unit 5. You know, we're getting a little closer to the AP exam every day. Every day we're getting closer to the AP exam, so I'll make sure to answer any questions. If I'm going too fast or anything, please stop me. Please make sure if you have questions, I answer them throughout the stream. I don't want to make anybody feel like they're leaving here with questions that are unanswered. The whole point of this is to learn more information about AP Environmental Science and eventually make a 5 on the exam to make the AP Environmental exam 5-able. All right. So let's move on to the content. Oh my gosh. As always, follow Think 5-able on all social media on Twitter, Insta, and on YouTube. There will be some replays posted on YouTube, and if you're not able to make it to the stream, hopefully you can watch the replay for free later and learn more. All right, so let's get started. Today is exactly 75 days before your AP exam. 75 is such a perfect number. I love it. But today we're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to start reviewing for the AP exam by going all the way back to the tragedy of the commons, something you learned at the beginning of this course, and something you're reviewing in Unit 5 right now or that you've already reviewed in Unit 5. We're also going to talk about the types of fishing, the impacts of overfishing, aquaculture, and we're going to go through and score a practice FRQ together. How does that sound? Great? Awesome. Okay, so here's the first thing. How are fish caught in the U.S.? Now, all of these on this graph are different types of ways we can catch fish. Bottom trawling, purse seines, pot and trap, long line. These are all different types of ways to catch fish. But what do these mean? These are the types of open ocean fishing. Driftnet, which is one of the ones on the screen. It's the biggest contributor to overfishing. Anything that comes in contact with these nets will become entangled, and these are invisible nets, so most fish can't see them. And let's see if we can get a picture of it over here on this diagram. And as you can see, if my pointer would work, you can see that we have drift net fishing over here. Right here where the fish gills get caught. This is how drift net fishing works. There's a boat and there's a big net. It's a lot more invisible than this with smaller mesh things, but the fish's gills can get caught in this. And it's not good because it's one of the biggest contributors to overfishing. Now, where was it? We're talking about drift net fishing, also known as most of these are types of drift net fishing. All right, the next type of fishing, purse seines. For tuna, but it also accidentally catches some dolphins. And purse seines is going to be a large purse-like net, no wonder why it's called purse seines, that's put into the ocean and is closed like a drawstring bag to trap the fish. So what that does is it accounts for 25% of fishing in the U.S. A quarter of the fish caught in the U.S. are caught by purse seines. Now let's see what that looks like really quickly. Purse seines. See it right here. This big net. You're going to close it like you would one of those drawstring bags, one of those backpacks that, oh hey, somebody's joined us. How are you? Hi Tanya, welcome to the stream. I think I'll go back to the beginning and start again. How are you doing tonight, Tanya? All right, so I'm going to go back to tragedy of the commons. So what is the tragedy of the commons? It's when private companies and people deplete natural resources that are free for the public use past its minimum sustainable yield. Minimum sustainable yield is an important vocab word in this AP Environmental Science course. And what that means is that that's the amount of resources that you can extract from an environment without being able to not extract them anymore. So private companies and people can go deplete natural resources. So these natural resources can be farmers getting groundwater from an aquifer and taking it all up. This can also be, us using grass when cows overgraze on grass. That's one of the biggest examples of tragedy of the commons. But here's a real world example. So there are water wars out west. Not the kind of wars you think of when you think of world wars, but water wars. California bought the water from the Colorado River, but Arizona wants it. So the Colorado River doesn't directly flow through most of California, but it does go through Arizona. Arizona wants to take the water from the Colorado River that's in Arizona. So who owns it? Nobody knows. They try to take the water, and whenever the water runs out, they're going to be in big trouble. There might be an actual war over this water. And the same thing is happening in places like Texas. More water rights are sold than the actual amount of water that we have. We don't have many lakes that are natural in Texas. All of the lakes in Texas are man-made. There was one natural lake up until 2010, but then the Army Corps of Engineers went in and tried to re-engineer the lake, and now we can't classify it as a natural lake anymore. So all of our water here is not actually from Texas and lakes that we're drawing to get our drinking water from. The Trinity River is one of the only true sources of water flowing through Texas. All right, so let's move on. How are fish caught in the U.S.? So this is a big diagram with all the different types of ways that we can catch fish. There's bottom trawling, purse seines, pot and trap, longline, gill net, and these are all covered under driftnet fishing. Now, what do all these actually mean, though? Driftnet fishing contributes the biggest contributor to overfishing. I'm going over all the different types of fishing right now, Tanya, so hopefully you can understand better when I'm done with this and we go through the diagrams. So driftnet fishing, it's the biggest contributor to overfishing. And basically what happens with driftnet is they're going to send a net out from the boat, and any fish that comes into contact is going to become nearly entangled in these invisible nets. So it's not good for fishing because we're going to take way too much fish out that we don't want to eat and we don't even need to eat. So which one of these is an example of driftnet fishing? You're right, it's down here. So there's the ship, just like I said, and the nets get put down, and there are these long, long nets that the fish try to swim into, but then their gills get caught. So that's not good. But it gets you a lot of fish with not a lot of work. So let's see, what percentage of fishing is that? That's some of these types of fishing over here. So it's going to be less than a quarter of the ways that we fish in the U.S. All right, now on to the next type of fishing, purse seines fishing. We supposedly use purse seines fishing for tuna, but the biggest bycatch, the biggest thing that we're overfishing that we don't need to and killing is dolphins. So what happens with purse seines is you have this large purse-like net. It's just a giant thing that's put into the ocean and it's closed like a drawstring bag. Like if you've ever had one of those small bags from summer camp and you try to pull on the strings and it like starts closing and it makes that little loop in the center, it traps the fish in there. And that's how dolphins get caught in it, because it'll swim into it, but then it can't swim out. It's supposed to be for tuna, but what's supposed to happen doesn't always happen in the real world. And so here we have our example of purse seine fishing. You can see those little orange rungs around the edge of the purse, and that's how this boat with this little, wire over here ends up closing this fishing net. All right, and that accounts for a quarter of total fish catch in the U.S. So we're using this fishing method, which could prove to be unsustainable in the future. That's a quarter of the fishing in the U.S. could also kill dolphins at the same time. We might be looking at something to where we cannot have a lot of dolphins in the U.S. anymore. We might not have any. I don't know. What's the next type of fishing? Hopefully this one's better. Longline. Free floating for days. So all of these blue subtitles right here, these are easy ways to think about it, the most important things to remember, because some of the types of fishing are actually very descriptive in their names, like purse seines. The seines are like the strings of a drawstring bag. The purse is the big bulk of it, the purse. But longline fishing, that's not as self-explanatory. It's just a line that's long, right? Kind of. So longline fishing is when lines are put out into the ocean that can be up to 80 miles long with thousands of baited hooks on them. So basically, they'll put these long lines of, basically it's a type of rope netting out that can be up to 80 miles long, and they just leave them out there for days. It's one of the longest types that takes to make fishing methods, and it takes a lot of fish in, but it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort to collect the fish. So let's see, is there an example of it in our diagram? Yes, longline fishing. So too bad the thing is covering it, but you can see right here that the hooks right there, they're on the edges, and the fishes are biting onto them, and they just leave this long line out here where you can catch the fish. Let's see what percentage of fishing that accounts for. 5% in the US. You know why? Because it takes so long to do it. And you have to take the hooks, and you have to put new hooks on once you get the fish off of them. So it takes a lot of time to prep the long line, and it also takes a lot of energy to pull all of the fish in. Imagine having an 80-mile rope you just have to pull piece by piece by piece by piece. There are machines to do it, but it still takes a ton of time. So there are pros and cons to all of these types of fishing methods. And what's our last one? Bottom trawling. Now, we can go look back at the graph now. It accounts for 54% of fishing in the US, the biggest category by far. Now, what is trawling? It causes ecosystem destruction. I feel like we hear that a lot in AP Environmental, don't we? I think we do. Maybe we should read some more about it. So the ocean floor is literally scraped by heavy nets to cause confusion and lure fish into the net. This sounds awful for the environment. This sounds like, why would any companies do that? We're like killing the ocean, right? It's cheap. It doesn't take a lot of time. It catches the fish without having to do any work. I think that there's one here, trawl lines. They will literally run this net on the floor of the ocean and collect all these fish. All they have to do is drive their boat for 5 minutes, and they can catch like 3 times the amount that they can catch with purse seines and Driftnet in half the time. That's why we use it so much. It's cheap and it's effective. That sounds like how we do our business in the US. Tanya, I hope I answered what's your question about what is trawling. If I didn't, you can stop now, but I'm going to go back to this slide so you can take a picture of this diagram. It's a good way to help you study for your test. It's also an easy way to remember a few things for the AP exam. Okay, and now I'm going to go over to this diagram because this also has another type of fishing that's not on the little, board thing right here. But it's also a type of fishing that we use a lot. Deep sea, okay, so this is not the one, but deep sea aquaculture cage. That one is a little bit popular, but that's not like a major one that we use in the United States. Like, it takes a lot of time. It's for deep sea fishing. We don't have a lot of deep sea fishing in the US. I mean, we might, but fish farming in cages, this isn't the major type either, but I don't know, it's just not as popular. It's not on the diagram. But sonar fishing. Sonar fishing. This is the last major type of fishing that we didn't cover on the chart. The sonar fishing, the reason why we don't use it a lot is because it's expensive and it requires technology. And we don't like to change our ways of doing things. No. Change is bad, right? Oh, I wish. So sonar fishing means that we use electronics to basically scan the deep sea like an X-ray to try to find fish, and then we'll use less hurtful types of trawl lines. We'll have little bags that we drag, but we only put them in certain areas to try to catch these fish. It's kind of more like a cross between Driftnet and trawl flap, but you're using the sonar technology to look and see if you can find where the fish are, if you want to catch a specific kind of fish. Tanya says in the chat, wait, are purse seines the one that are seen in movies? Yes. And are you talking about Finding Nemo? Because if you're talking about Finding Nemo, then I can 100% say that you see purse seines in that movie because I have watched that movie too many times. But you can also see longline fishing in some movies like Jaws. They use driftnet fishing and longline fishing. And Aquaman is when they're the Aquaman movie. This is a random tangent, but I think that they're using purse seine fishing and like when Aquaman's underwater. But then I think at another time they're using driftnet fishing because they're not using the right boat that you would have to use for purse seines. But that's not something you need to know for the AP exam. So maybe we'll learn some more relevant information, shall we? Okay, the impacts of overfishing. So when I was talking about driftnet fishing and purse seines fishing and longline fishing and bottom trawling, so basically all the types of fishing, you're getting some kind of bycatch. Like This contributes to overfishing. This overfishes for dolphins. This can get any kind of fish that we don't need to sell and they don't need to eat. Overfishing is when I'm going into the ocean and I'm taking too many fish away. Like, I'm catching fish that I don't need, so I end up killing them. And I can't just bring those fish back to life after I've taken them out of water for too long. And when we're taking too many fish out to sell, even if it's not just bycatch, which is when you're taking the unintended species out of the ocean, overfishing can just happen when you're taking too many of the fish that you want out of the sea. In Japan, a few years ago, they had a problem with some bluefin tuna sushi fish that they needed, but all of their fishers were taking too many and they were trying to hog them for themselves, just like in the tragedy of the commons. It's popping up here again. It's in Unit 1, and it was in Unit 5 now again. So another question in the chat was, don't purse seines also accidentally take catch crabs? Yes, that's one of the bycatch of purse seines as well. When I was talking about tuna, but also dolphins, there are also crabs in there. There are tons of species that get overfished and bycaught. We know that they happen a lot, but they're not even like the biggest types of bycatch. And halibut and bluefin tuna are constantly overfished. Crabs are usually not referred to as overfishing by the AP exam because crabs aren't fish. So usually they don't like to say overfishing for crabs because it kind of implies that crabs are fish, which isn't true. So halibut and bluefin tuna, that is in the chat, that's such a technicality. Yeah, but isn't the AP exam all about technicalities? I mean, if you really think about it, you kind of have to know all of the technical details of everything if you want to try to get this 5. The halibut and bluefin tuna are the ones that are easiest to write about. You can write about bluefin tuna in sushi. Halibut is a common food used in England for fish and chips. They fish that one off the coast of England and France constantly. Those are 2 easy ones that if you ever have to write about overfishing, you can, and it's no problem. And also, overfishing leads to a loss of biodiversity due to unsustainable fishing methods. Unsustainable fishing methods. 54% of our fishing, and then another 25. So more than 75% of our fishing, almost 80% of our fishing in the United States is unsustainable. I don't like to hear that number. 80% is unsustainable. That's just not something great to think about. They lead to a loss of biodiversity. That means we're losing fish in the ocean. If we overfish too much, we won't be able to get some kinds of species of fish back that we were once fishing. Once we go past our minimum sustainable yield, there's not enough fish to repopulate, and then we can't get the fish anymore. We can't get them back like we want to. I mean, if you think about it, we've already done that with some species. If you think about cheetahs, they're past their cheetahs are not a fish, but cheetahs, we've killed and hunted so many of them for their fur that now they're genetically extinct, which means they're going to be extinct in a number of years that we could actually count, but there's not enough genes to repopulate the population like we would a renewable resource. So, I mean, if you think about that, we could start having the same problems with fish, and fish is such a big part of people's diet, especially in Asia and in Europe in some places. So what are we going to do with those cultures of people who use fish as their main food in their diet? These are questions to think about when we're thinking about solving these problems for the environment. When we grow up to be adults and we want to go into a career like engineering or environmental science, any kind of science that we're looking at what happens to the world, we need to be the people to think about these problems and help solve these problems. And another question in the chat, doesn't caviar also contribute to a loss of biodiversity as we are eating fish eggs, so there are no more baby fish to grow up and repopulate? Kind of yes and no. We're eating fish eggs and not the actual fish, so the fish can always make more eggs. I know that fish only have a limited number of eggs that you can produce, but as long as we're not going past the minimum sustainable yield, which could be a problem in the future, we're not actually, having extinction issues. Caviar could be an issue in the future, and as many as a few days, a few months. Like, it does not take that long with overfishing and overherding to make a population go extinct. All right. Now, what are we going to do to protect these things that are being overfishing? We have a few relevant laws that the AP exam has so kindly told us go with this unit. So we have the Endangered Species Act, which prohibits the harm or harvesting of endangered species and protects their habitats. So basically, the government says, no, that species is extinct. You can't take that. You can't kill that cheetah for its fur. No, that's illegal. That's what the Endangered Species Act does. It also says that we can't go develop on where these things, like, I'm going to use cheetahs as an example. It's a lot today. I'm sorry if you don't like cheetahs. I think they're kind of cool, whatever. We're going to go say, no, you cannot go develop near that cheetah's habitat. That cheetah needs to live there. We're trying to get it not be extinct. It's genetically extinct, but we don't want it to be actually extinct. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This one is more about the sea. This one is more about water use. The Marine Mammal Protection Act was made for manatees, sea cows. We don't want to kill all of those. We don't want to kill our beluga whales. No, we love our beluga whales. Ever been to Sea Life Aquarium? Exactly. We want to keep those things alive so we can use them and maybe abuse them, but that's not the problem that we're dealing with today. We're just trying to not have us hunt them and kill them in the ocean. Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. This is one of the big ones that the AP exam loves to test on. CITES. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. This is one of the international laws that prevents the trade of threatened or endangered marine species. It can also be terrestrial land-based species. So basically we're saying, no, we're sending too many good animal furs from extinct animals out of Africa to the other developed nations. We need to stop doing that, but we need to do it proactively. We're not letting anybody trade threatened or endangered species anymore. Just like rare parrots from the Amazon. We can't trade those anymore just for show. No, we need to keep those, safe. And actually, if you think about it, people like wildlife officers or UN National Refuge Lands officers, they have more jurisdiction than local police. What they can do is they can take, if you're trying to hunt something that's illegal, they can take the gun that you're trying to use to kill the animal that you've killed, the car that you used to get the animal, and they can give you a giant fine that you're going to have to pay to the national park or national refuge. They have a lot of power. They can take anything without having to take you to court, because some of these natural refuge areas are in such far away places that we can't get to, so it's going to take forever to get them a court date. So we need to stop this now. We're trying to be proactive about the environment. So that's one good thing that our governments have done for us. We've given our national wildlife officers a lot of jurisdiction in trying to help the poaching and selling of endangered species. And last but definitely not least, the UN Law of the Sea. This is one of the laws with the most text, the most stuff you need to know about it. But basically, there are these things called exclusive economic zones, which means that from my shore in Florida and 200 miles east of that, that is all my sovereign territory. I'm sorry, that is all territory that I contain the rights to trade in. Anything that's from the coast of Florida to 12 miles east is my sovereign territory. You can't be in here from 12 miles off the coast of anywhere in the United States or anywhere in any country without having their permission. This allows for individual transferable quotas, which are allocated quotas that can be sold to others. So what that means is that places like Hong Kong, Hong Kong is not really controlled by China, but it's also not really an independent state. So anything that's the sovereignty of Hong Kong can basically just be sold. It can be transferred to other people. If you think about it, you can take some of these countries that don't have strict laws, and you can basically sell the rights to anything that you want to sell. So I've been proposing a lot of grim and bad stuff that's happening to our environment because of open ocean fishing. But is there anything besides just making laws to prevent too much open ocean fishing? Yes, there is. It's called aquaculture. Aquaculture is when it's basically just a fish farm. So what happens in this fish farm is that we raise fish from eggs, and we don't actually have to withdraw fish from the ocean anymore. We take the fish that we raise and then we kill them and sell them for food. We don't have to rely on the open ocean anymore. We can just grow our own fish, just like we grow our own cows for milk and the hamburger meat that we get from it. Or we take our vegetables from farms around the US. Like, we don't just rely on the environment to give us those anymore. We have our own farms for them, which is just like what aquaculture is. But aqua meaning water, culture meaning agriculture. Just put the two words together, and we got aquaculture. And it releases ecological pressure on open ocean fish populations. So we don't have to use those unsustainable fishing methods anymore if we can just raise the fish in our own farms. And agriculture is the raising of fish in controlled areas, usually for a company to sell. That's just a basic definition. It can safely raise fish. We eat them, we sell them, and we can also use them and put them back in natural environments to repopulate. But whenever something has pros, for some reason it also always has to have cons. I don't know why, but it does. That's just how the world works. The runoff of waste from aquaculture. So think about it. We have waste runoff problems from agriculture with nitrates, nitrites, phosphates from cow manure that we're using as fertilizer, right? So fish have to pee and poop too, don't they? Just like our land animals? Yes, they do. So this runoff of waste and from the plants that we have to have in these aquaculture tanks can leak off excess nitrates, nitrites, ammonia, and phosphorus into the environment. And they can leak off from our fish farms into major water sources, like these rivers that carry water. And rivers are supposed to help clean the water with the banks and the other, the moving water. It's supposed to help clean the water. And we're not supposed to have fish pee and poop in that because we're going to drink that. I don't want nitrates, nitrites, ammonia, and phosphates in my drinking water. I don't want to be drinking fish pee and poop. But, we have to make trade-offs somewhere. So maybe we just have to have better water purification processes. Or maybe we just have to have more rules for aquaculture, more laws to protect it. I don't know, but somehow we're going to have to make laws that help support our environment and help support the business. There has to be a middle ground somewhere that we just don't see all the time. All right. So now this was a pretty short presentation, short lecture, but now we're going to move into practice FRQ. Like I said, we're 75 days away from our AP exam. So one of the most important things about the APES exam is the writing. The test is scored 50-50, I believe, which means that half of your exam score, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, comes from your FRQ, and half of it comes from your multiple choice. So people always like to focus on multiple choice and say, oh yeah, well, if I just know the facts, then I'm fine, right? No, you have to know all about the facts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this FRQ. I might pause for a second and let you think about your FRQ, but you can look at it, see if you can respond to some of these questions on your own. But what I want to do is I'm going to go through each section and grade it. I'm going to give you a few minutes to look at it. Hopefully you can come up with a few answers to a few of the easier questions like identify or choose in the comments. All right, I'm going to get up for a second so you guys have time to look at this. All right, so have you guys had a chance to look at this without me staring at you? So it looks like I have a few good answers to question A in the comments. And it also looks like C has a few answers because I just talked about the laws. See how my stream plays into the FRQ that we're about to look at? All right, So right now we're going to go to the Part A response from the sample student from the AP FRQ, and we're going to see how they did. All right. This person said that 1965 to 1970, the fish population declined 500,000 tons over 5 years. So if you divide 500,000 by 5, you get 100,000 metric tons per year. So let's see how they scored against the scoring guide. So the scoring guide said the greatest time period of decline was 1965 to 1970. That seems right. And then it also says that 700,000 metric tons minus 200,000 metric tons would be 500,000 tons divided by 5 years would be 100,000 metric tons per year. And basically, they got the right answer. So they got, don't you guys think that how many points they got? Put it in the comments. Tell me what you think that they got in points. Yeah, I think that they got 2 as well. Okay, so let's move on to Part B. Part B says choose any 2 commercial fishing practices from the list below. For each of your choices, describe the practice and explain the role it plays in the depletion of marine organisms. So you can choose from bottom trawling, we talked about that. Longline fishing, we talked about that. Using drift nets, gill nets, or purse seines, we talked about that. And using sonar, we did briefly talk about that one, but that wasn't as much in depth. But you got 3 choices that you know about that you just learned out of these 4, and you only have to pick about 2 of them. So let's see what one of the 2 one at a time of what the student said. All right, so this student talks about bottom trawling. So you can read that for a few seconds. I'm not going to read this one out loud since it's a little bit longer. You can read it and see what you thought the points were. All right, so they identified bottom trawling as one of the 4. So let's see. So they had to describe the practice and see how it plays the role in depletion or overfishing of environments. So they said bottom trawling, that's good. They said it uses a large net along the bottom of the ocean from a boat. So boom, they know the method and they have a brief explanation. But now they have 1 point so far, in my opinion. But now let's look, do they have the contribution to depletion? So they say it's detrimental to mollusks, coral, vegetation, starfish, and shellfish, which live on the bottom of the ocean. These organisms, which are not caught for food, are thrown away as bycatch and don't usually survive. Let's see. What does the rubric say? It says that it catches many non-target species, bycatch. And it also says benthic habitat destruction. Well, mollusks, coral, vegetation, starfish, shellfish, these are all things that live in benthic habitats, and they go on to say it depletes the coral reefs because of the major destruction to the coral. So boom, in my opinion, they got the point for bottom trawling, and they got the point for the depletion. I think that you guys are agreeing in the comments that they got 2 points there, but they still got to do another one. So what was their second one? They talked about drift nets. They're carried by a boat in the mid-depth area of an open ocean and are usually a few miles long. The net is designed to catch a fish's gills so it cannot escape. Drift nets catch a large amount of bycatch and play a major role in the depletion of shrimp, sea turtles, dolphins, whales, and sharks. Because of the way of trapping marine organisms, drift nets often catch more bycatch, which is thrown back into the ocean dead, than it does of the fish it is aiming to catch. So let's see how they scored. So this one they talked about drift nets. They did say that they were carried by a boat. Drift nets are carried by a boat. They're large nets, usually a few miles long. The net is designed to catch a fish's gill, so it talks about how it catches it. But does it talk about any of these specifically? Look at that for a second. Okay, so they got the contribution to depletion, but did they accurately describe how drift nets work? the AP exam says that you must have large nets that are allowed to drift. Does it say large nets? It says large nets, they're usually a few miles long, but does it say that they're stretching for miles allowed to drift? It doesn't say anything about allowing it to drift or even towed. So, what do you guys think? Do you think they would give them a point? Okay, so I see a few yeses, a few nos. So personally, I don't think I would give them the point because the underlined section on the rubric, they didn't talk about that. That's just something basic from the rubric that's underlined. Like, it's not even that it just said and set out and allowed to drift, like the ununderlined portions. No. So for Part A, we think that they got 2 points, right? And for Part B, we think that they got 3 points so far out of the 4. So that's not bad. We're doing pretty good on this FRQ so far, the student. So now let's move on to Part C. The Part C says, identify one international regulation or United States federal law that applies to the harvesting of marine food resources and explain how that regulation or law helps to manage marine species. We talked about laws. Some of you guys gave me some laws in the chat over here. Let's go see what this student said. The ban put on the harvesting of female Maryland blue crabs in Chesapeake Bay has had a major impact on the revival of the species. Because of the rapid harvesting, which was causing the species to be at the rate of risk of becoming endangered, a new law made it illegal to harvest the Maryland blue crab. This has allowed for species to easily reproduce, which has brought the population of the species up by noticeable amounts. Now let's look on the rubric here. Now, if you guys want to read what it says in italics, that's fine. But the question says, identify one international regulation or United States federal law. Did they name a law or even identify a law? And was it international or was it US federal? It doesn't look like they actually named a law. They didn't even name the law. And looking on this list, it doesn't even look like they were describing one of these. Does it? No, it doesn't. So, do you guys think that they earn the point for this section? No. Okay, I don't think so either. So, they lost the 1 point in this section. That's not bad so far. So far, they've got 2 points for the first Part A, 3 points for the second Part B, which means that they have 5 points so far out of those 6. Not bad, but then we don't get this 1 point, so now we only have 5 out of 7 points. So let's see if they can redeem themselves on Part B. 5 out of 7 is still not bad for an FRQ, but you can always strive to do better. All right. So Part D would say, the oceans of the world are often referred to as the commons. Give an example of one other such commons, explaining how human activity affects that commons, and then suggest one practical method for managing that commons. Okay, well, let's see what the student said. Now, actually, before we move on, does anybody want to remind me of what a commons is? Talked about this earlier in the stream. Is it maybe something like tragedy of the commons? Now we talked about the tragedies, but what are the actual commons? Think about it for a second while I move on. Pause the video if you're watching the replay. Try to see if you can think of the commons. Okay, so the response actually got cut off, so I had to put the rest of the text right here. But you can read what this student said. Okay, so it seemed like this person was talking. It looks like they named the commons. Let's go look at the rubric, see if the rubric accepts this commons and what they said was hurting it and how to protect it. All right, they said The question said, give an example of a commons and explain how human activity is affected and suggest one practical method for managing it. So here are their list of acceptable commons. Oh, whoa, they say atmosphere air, right there, number 1. Do you guys think they got that point? All right, I think that was pretty straightforward too. I think that they got that point, yeah. Okay, so they identified air, atmosphere as the commons. So let's see, a human activity. So the point for that says it must be linked to the chosen commons. So they said a human activity and brief explanation of how that activity degrades the selected commons can be accepted. So the rubric says that you must have fossil fuel combustion increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, actually linking it to something. So let's see. The author of this FRQ says, the burning of fossil fuels, decomposition of landfills, and use of motors and automobiles and other appliances all contribute to the pollution of the air. Okay, so it says the pollution of the air, but it doesn't say how it's polluting the air. It's not really a brief explanation of how it degrades the commons. It just has pollution. So some of you are thinking that it should get the point. I personally don't think that it should get the point because they're talking about how pollution is affecting it, but when you're taking the AP exam, you never want to use broad words like pollution, global warming. You never want to use those words unless you're actually explaining what those words means in context, how we're fixing this word. Like, you need to explain every single part of the word if you want to get the points. AP readers are kind of stingy sometimes, especially after they've had a long day of grading 700 of the same FRQs that they're about to grade for you. The pollution of the air. So you guys think that it got the point. I don't think that it got the point. So maybe let's see if we can agree on this next one. So the management methods. So they said must be linked to the chosen commons. So the rubric says any specific management suggestion that is practical and linked to the chosen commons can be accepted. So they had a problem with linking in the last one, but let's see if we can get it in this part. So here are some example answers. Education of the public must relate to a specific problem, and regulations must be directed at a specific problem. So this person said we could use worldwide regulations to set the amount of these pollution-causing practices that are allowed. Because air is circulated worldwide, regulations must be set everywhere in order to properly manage the commons. So the last sentence is kind of a general conclusion, but what we need to focus on right now is should we give the point to need to be set on the amount of pollution-causing practices that are allowed. Now, in AP Environmental, you're going to talk about 2 types of pollution, point source and non-point source. And I don't know if you guys have got to this yet in your class, but with non-point source pollution, you can't point to a specific problem. Like, you can't say who's polluting the air here. You can't figure out where it comes from. So they don't say how they're going to put this regulation into place. So I think that you guys are agreeing in the comments, but I don't think that they got this point either. So they got 1 of these 3 points. So now let's add up our total points again. So we got 2 points from Part A out of 2. We got 3 points from Part B, 0 points from Part C, but then we got 1 point from Part D. So that means that we have, correct me if I'm wrong, but that we have 6 points out of 10. Yeah. So I think that we have 6 out of 10 points. Now, on the next slide, I have what the AP readers say that they actually scored this student on. Woo! We scored them the same, 6 points. A few of you got confused with identifying if pollution could count or not to get them that point of the human activities. But for the most part, we got the score right. So it says they got a point for the setup and they got a point for the calculation. For Part A, boom, we said that. On Part B, they said that we described bottom trawling and the practice that contributes. We said that. But then we said that we didn't describe drift nets well enough in Part B. Boom, we said that. C, no points were earned because no actual law was identified. Sounds like something we said together. Then Part D, 1 point was earned for identifying the atmosphere as a commons. That's what we said. I think we're doing a pretty good job. And this might seem like boring and something that's not important, but when we're actually getting closer to the AP exam, scoring these FRQs is going to be really useful because it can show you what the AP readers will accept and what they won't accept and what you actually need to be able to get the points. So if you ever are confused in a unit, Google AP Environmental Science Practice FRQs Unit 7 CFCs. And you can get a FRQ that was actually on the AP exam. And if you Google scoring guide, you can get sample student responses and how the AP reader scored them. You can know exactly how much you have to write. You can know exactly what needs to be said to get the point on something. You can learn that some words like pollution, global warming, climate change can't just get the point on their own unless you actually describe what those words mean. So, if you guys get one thing, make sure that you're always preparing for the AP exam. We're 75 days away, guys. You guys can do it. But make sure to always follow Think Fiveable on all social media platforms and Think Fiveable. Think that you can get a 5 on your AP exam because it is really fiveable. All right, guys. Have a great night. See you later. Hopefully on my next stream.